always done more than connect coastlines, he said. The sea has always done more than connect coastlines. For centuries, oceans were simply routes for trade, migration, and the weather that shaped livelihoods. Today, across the Indo-Pacific, those same routes have become a nervous system of statecraft. Highways for commerce, yes, but increasingly a stage where naval formations and aircraft carry political meaning as loudly as they carry tonnage. Over the last month, that stage has tightened. Movements, once treated as routine, carrier transits, destroyer escorts, maritime patrol flights, are being read in capitals as deliberate messages. In Tokyo, Prime Minister Sanae Takakaichi has made security a central pillar of her government's agenda. In Washington, President Donald J. Trump's administration continues to emphasize forward deployment and partner exercises as tools to shape regional calculations. In Manila, President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has overseen deeper operational cooperation with long-standing partners. Beijing's diplomats and the People's Liberation Army have answered those moves in kind. The result is a choreography at sea whose ripples reach Washington, Beijing, Tokyo, and across Southeast Asia. The choreography is plain. On April 20th, 2026, Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense reported the Chinese aircraft carrier Liaoning transited the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan shadowed the transit with fighters and helicopters. Regional militaries watched it as both a training movement and a high-visibility signal. He said carrier movements compress message and optics. They demonstrate reach, they test surveillance and response. And they create a vivid image that domestic and international audiences instantly understand. An aircraft carrier is not only a war-fighting platform, it is a symbol obvious to policymakers and the public alike. Days earlier and since, the annual Balikatan exercises between the United States and the Philippines opened on April 20, 2026, in what participants described as the largest iteration to date. More than 17,000 personnel, Filipino, American, and contingents from Japan, Australia, Canada, France, and New Zealand began nearly 3 weeks of live fire drills, amphibious operations, and air and naval interoperability exercises across Philippine territory and adjacent waters. Manila and Washington framed the scale as reassurance and operational testing, an effort to ensure partners can operate together under stress and to signal commitment to collective defense. That reassurance is precisely what Beijing worries about. A spokesperson for China's foreign ministry cautioned in Manila that joint military exercises involving the United States, the Philippines, and Japan risk eroding regional trust and stability. State media and diplomatic briefings in Beijing amplified that message, arguing that tighter military ties among neighbors and the presence of third-party forces near areas Beijing considers sensitive risk hard, ending strategic blocks and raising the odds of miscalculation. Russia's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova pointedly warned, as she has in public statements this month, that the participation of the Japanese Navy in joint drills with the United States is a cause for concern and increases tensions. Words have accompanied actions. The PLA's Southern Theatre Command confirmed live-fire naval drills east of Luzon operations that included sea-air coordination, rapid maneuvering, and underway replenishment deployed to test logistics and sustainment for operations farther from China's coast. Satellite images and open-source videos circulated widely, showing coordinated evolutions of modern surface combatants. Analysts noted the presence of large hulls and escorts consistent with China's newest destroyer classes. For regional navies and for commercial operators, these are not simply images. Each formation changes the risk calculations for ships, insurers, and ports. Geography creates those risks. The Indo-Pacific's first island chain, the string of Japanese islands that runs south from Kyushu through Okinawa to Taiwan and the Philippines, channels massive volumes of trade. Tankers carrying energy, container ships moving finished goods, and bulk carriers threading through straits and channels all rely on predictability. When navies flex in those corridors, insurers reprice voyages, freight may be rerouted along longer and costlier paths, and supply chain timetables shift. A temporary safety zone, a diverted shipping lane, or even the perception that combats might worsen can ripple into commodity prices and inventory strategies across the globe. Local impacts are immediate and human. Coastal communities and island towns watch radar plots with as much interest as any foreign ministry. Fishing patterns change, tourism bookings wobble, and port authorities adjust berth schedules and pilotage, sailors on naval vessels and captains on freighters alike, negotiating not just weather and mechanical issues, but the political geometry of maritime movement. He said, the dry line, the S on a chart, a shipping lane here, a separation zone there, can suddenly feel like fault lines for supply chains. Interpretation matters as much as presence. One country's freedom of navigation operation is another's intrusion. One navy's routine training is another's calibrated coercion. The Taiwan Strait is the most acute illustrator of that ambiguity. Taipei and Washington describe the waters as international. Beijing speaks from a different legal and political vantage. When a carrier or a flotilla moves through that narrow corridor, capitals decode intent as much as they track positions. He said, when a carrier or a flotilla moves through that narrow corridor, capitals decode intent as much as they track positions. That decoding draws heavily on recent history, political narratives, and the audiences each government must answer to. There are practical ways to lower the chance that an encounter morphs into a crisis. Military leaders and experts routinely point to measures that can reduce accidents and misinterpretation, advance notification of major exercises, standardized procedures for on-scene encounters, hotlines between navies, and agreed protocols for incident investigations. Where such instruments have been exercised, robust information exchanges, direct naval to naval lines, the odds of an unintended escalation fall. Where they are absent, political friction can block the development of habits of safety. The result is uneven risk management across the region. Those instruments do not require trust to be an illusion of weakness. Rather, many strategists argue that credible defense postures should be paired with active diplomacy. He said deterrence and dialogue are not mutually exclusive. The idea is straightforward. Readiness and capability can deter miscalculation, while sustained channels of military-to-military engage me. Net and diplomatic communication can manage the friction that deterrence creates. The policy challenge is to keep choices deliberate and avoid reflexive responses to routine provocations. That balance is what leaders are testing now in Tokyo. Prime Minister Takaichi has framed Japan's expanded role in exercises in its evolving defense posture as necessary adaptations to a changed security landscape, one in which Japan must be ready to contribute more directly to collective deterrence, particularly around Taiwan and contested sea lanes. In Manila, President Marcos Jr. has overseen larger allied drills that his government argues fortify Philippine sovereignty and maritime rights. Washington, for its part, has continued to emphasize partnerships and forward presence as central elements of its Indo-Pacific strategy. Beijing's official line emphasizes the risks those moves create. Chinese spokespeople have warned that deeper cooperation among US partners near China's claimed areas of interest is provocative and destabilizing. The PLA frames much of its activity as training to prepare forces for sustained operations farther from home. The theater commands publicly describe exercises as routine measures to improve readiness. But every transit, every replenishment at sea, and every coordinated air-sea drill also serves as a signal both outward to foreign audiences and inward to domestic constituencies. Neither escalation nor de-escalation is inevitable. He said there is no inevitability to these tensions becoming conflicts. Still, the density of simultaneous operations, carrier transits, allied drills at operational scale, patrols near contested waters compresses decision times and increases the chance that a mistake is amplified. That is why the hard work of diplomacy, the sort that builds, tests, and institutionalizes incident management procedures, matters so much. It is not a substitute for deterrence. It is a complement. Commercial mariners need those guardrails, no. T as a favor, but as a necessity. When the military geometry of a sea lane shifts, freight costs, insurance premiums, and delivery times follow. Businesses reroute, sometimes paying a premium to avoid perceived danger. Markets, in turn, react to those costs and to questions about energy and supply reliability. The economic stakes are not abstract. They are counted in finished goods stuck at sea, in delayed shipments, and in price volatility for consumers and industries. The practical steps are incremental but concrete. Agreed notifications of large exercises, clearer rules of the road for close approaches at sea and air, joint training on incident investigations and search and rescue protocols, and more routine exchanges between maritime authorities. Strengthening regional forums and encouraging direct military-to-military channels can reduce frictions, but all of these measures depend on political will. In an environment where narratives shape reaction as much as platforms do, leaders mew. Be willing to trade political cover for moments of transparency at sea. The actors speak in more than words. They speak with radar tracks, with coordinated replenishment at sea, with the geometry of formations and the timing of transits. The Liaoning's passage through the Taiwan Strait in April and Chinese naval passages between Okinawa's southern isles in recent days were read and replayed in Tokyo, Taipei and Manila. At the same time, Balikatan's scale and the participation of new partners signaled another message: alliances and partnerships can be operational tools for reassurance. What comes next will depend on leadership choices made in ministries and command centers, and on how well practical risk-reducing mechanisms are deployed and trusted. The Indo-Pacific's new normal could be a form of stable competition, a tough balance of credible deterrence and predictable rules, or it could become a cycle of risky signaling without the guardrails that keep accidents from becoming cry. He said, preserving freedom of the seas and keeping commercial lines open will require blending strength with statesmanship. The region's challenge is to prove that blend is possible in practice. Military readiness can coexist with confidence building. Deterrence can be coupled with the kinds of tested communications that stop a midnight interception from turning into a headline-driven escalation. That is the dual path diplomats and defense officials often return to in private and sometimes acknowledge in public. Train hard, defend credibly, but talk more and bind actions to predictable procedures. For sailors and captains, for families on island shores, and for markets that depend on steady flows, the preference is simple: predictability and safety. For policymakers, the task is harder and more ambiguous. They must sustain credible deterrence while creating and sustaining the tested mechanisms that prevent and manage incidents in coming weeks and months as formations move through the first island chain and across choke points that funnel global trade. The signals at sea will continue to be multifaceted, sometimes tactical, sometimes political, always consequential. The choices will matter. They will determine whether the Indo-Pacific navigates a difficult chapter of strategic competition with restraint and clarity, or whether it drifts into a pattern of escalatory responses that turns vital sea lanes into sources of uncertainty rather than conduits of prosperity. The path that preserves both security and peace is the one that pairs readiness with restraint, deterrence with dialogue, and capability with the institutions that turn sharp edges into manageable risks.